John Reyes, and thanks for joining in on the Authority Marketing Blueprint. Sit back, relax, and grab your virtual seat because in this episode and every other episode, I'll be interviewing and collaborating with another high-level marketing and copywriting expert. If you haven't yet, go ahead and get some help along the way as we dish out and pinpoint some of the most profitable, powerful marketing and copywriting wisdom. Get some help with implementing everything you'll hear in this episode and other episodes by downloading my personal sales funnel swipe file stash at copyblueprints.com. Now, grab your virtual seat and listen in. Drew Bay is on today, and I'm actually really excited to have him on. We've worked together for, a few weeks on a project, but he's been a direct response copywriter for quite some time. He refers to himself as kind of a marketing doctor, writing and prescribing remedies for underperforming advertising. Right now, he's specializing in alternative health, but has been in the game for maybe, close to a decade, and is also mentored, trained, and wrote alongside with some of today's OG A-list direct response copywriters. Thanks for coming on, Drew.
Thanks for having me, John. Like being here.
So there was, when we worked together for just a little short time, we kind of had to collaborate on some copy together, but there was a lot more I didn't really get to know about you. And I know your journey your copywriting journey was actually, it sounded like you were surrounded by some of today's strongest A-list mentors early on in your journey, and they kind of were the ones to get you on your start for your freelance career, right?
Yeah, that's correct. I'd like to say, I think I included this in a resume way back when, that I'm probably one of the only you could count on, this is a guesstimate, you could probably count on 3 or 4 hands the amount of people that and mentored with some of the people I did, plus had a experience working with someone in a 9-to-5 that ran a Dan Kennedy, Glazer Kennedy Insider Circle local chapter back when that was a thing. And then, of course, learning from the current bests, the Steffens and the folks from Copy Accelerator back in its heyday and all the way into now. So, yeah, it's sort of got a varied experience.
Yeah, in my opinion, Copy Accelerator still got some of the best, and especially when it comes to alternative health. Me personally, and I feel like you're the same way, as I still like to surround some of the new school freelancers and copywriters coming out the gate are still really, really good. You can't underestimate some of the 2-3 year copywriters in, some of them are picking up really smart, but what's more inspiring is seeing people 10, 15, 20 years in who are still hustling. And that was a little side tangent, but I think you were mentioning that, so you didn't rush into copy, right? I think when you first started, you said you were training with an A-lister and you kind of were very methodical from the beginning, or like do these exercises, do the basics over and over and over.
Yeah, so, taking it back a bit here, my origin story, if you will, I think it was last year of university, copywriting kind of came on my radar. My dad actually had an HR consulting company, and he was looking for way back when he was looking for ways to promote his business, and so he's kind of stumbled on the Dan Kennedys, the Gary Halberts, all those, the OGs, as you say, and he sort of like exposed me to that. I was taking marketing in business school, and I kind of always envisioned myself as like the Mad Men setting, right? Like sitting around a boardroom table, coming up with slogans and cool turns of phrase, and on big like Fortune 500 companies. And so that was more appealing as I was specializing in marketing. And then when I realized that you could actually seemingly make a pretty good living writing, just doing writing, and I was always told I was a strong writer, I'm like, maybe there's something to this. So I kind of looked into it, and I was still doing the 9-to-5, right? Like I just graduated college and I was trying to look for a job and had to do the whole 9-to-5 thing, right? And so I ended up with a couple different agencies doing, SEO and PPC, and there was some copywriting involved, and I wanted to do more of that, but it was, as you probably know, most people, I wouldn't say look down, but it's such a thing in the back of their mind, right? It's all about campaign strategy and bidding and SEO and design and graphics. People that aren't in the know, right? It's like copy is just anyone can write, so just, you know, do whatever you can, even though it's arguably the most important part of any sort of campaign. And so I kind of yearned for more of the copywriting side of things, right? I only got it a little bit here and there. And so anyway, what happened is I ended up getting let go from my 9 to 5 back in early 2016. And needless to say, I wasn't my wife's biggest fan because I'm like, I am not putting up with any of the bullshit of 9 to 5 anymore. I'm going to make this copywriting thing work. I did have 2 clients at the time who I was working with on the side, nowhere near enough to replace a 9 to 5 income. But I'm like, I'm not going back again. I'm not working for somebody else. I hate the commute. I hate all the other stuff that people talk about. I'm going to make this work, come hell or high water. And I said that my wife wasn't the biggest fan because at the time we had a 3 month old. Just had my first daughter. My wife was on mat leave, so you know it was like we need money. We were in debt at the time, your usual thing, right? And
Right.
so my desire to actually make it in copywriting was stronger than I need cash right now, you know. I knew I could make it work. And so anyway, fast forward a few months, and I decided I was going to attend the 2016 AWAI boot camp, and you know, we'll see what happens. Of course, it was probably the best decision I ever made because of the people I met and the road that I paved from that. So show up there, and then is a combination, I'd say, of hard luck, of good luck and hard work, because I just happened to sit beside. I'm sure a lot of your listeners will know Kim Krause-Schwalm. She's an A-list copywriter of many years. I didn't know who she was at the time. I just happened to sit beside her through one of the sessions. We get to talking. She asked me what I'm doing, where I come from, and asked me to send some samples. And so I do that. And we kept in touch after the event. And you know, I meet some of the other bigger names at the time at the event. And so leave there, think about, man, I should probably do one of these spec assignments, just at least get on one of these marketers' radars. So I only did one, and I put my all into it. I did a spec assignment, and turns out I heard back from the chief of that and from that company, and he said that it was in the top 5 best submissions they got from the event. So I'm like, oh, okay, that's pretty cool. And little did I know that my soon-to-be mentor was the copy chief of that health company. And so I'm still talking with Kim. We had a couple calls, and she's like, "Hey, would you ever be interested in being a copy cub of Paris Lampropoulos?" And so, of course, I knew who that was. And I'm like, well, yeah, I would love that. That sounds amazing, you know. And I didn't realize that he was actually the copy chief of that same company that I had submitted the spec for. So things were starting to materialize. And I'm like, okay, yeah, like that sounds great. So she says, okay, I'll let him know. Turns out he was starting a new cub group who cycles through, you know, every 4 or 5. And in our case, it turned out to be 6.5 years. Um, and so anyway, he reaches out to me. He's like, I heard that you want to be a copy cub. If that's true, read this book, come up with all your takeaways in the next like 4 days. I'm like, oh shit. Okay. And all the while I'm thinking, what am I going to have to pay for this? What's going to be involved? Like, I'm not good enough, all this kind of head trash, right? And so anyway, that was sort of the preamble to I ended up getting into Paris's Cub group, and it's this most recent one we just ended last year.
That's insane. I mean, I say insane because that's the old school. I wanted to talk about, I think we'll get more to it in a sec, but that's like the old school versus, I guess, new school, to, for lack of a better term, entry into the freelance world. Even some people just want to learn copy for themselves or to build a career, strengthen their current career.
Hmm.
But that is very by the book and like showing OG hardcore respect for the art of direct response, which is something I would love. I wish everyone started off that way, you know, but there's also the new school thing, which is 3 to 6 months, I'll get you out the gate becoming a 6-figure
Yeah.
freelancer or whatever. That's to each their own. But to follow that, you know, that's some of the best copywriters today, some of them have gone on to become CMOs or to scale their own companies, but a lot of them are still freelancing, are still going in-house, scaling, testing their own offers and all that stuff. But some of the best ones have and continue to go back to that mentality of, if I have to put in the work very slowly and read a bunch of stuff and then commit for a few years just to get very methodical and very good and systematic, I'll do it. A lot of like the vets and, I'm not necessarily veterans, but that mentality is something that has breeded some of the best copywriters today, whether or not they're still freelancing or building their own company or testing
Right.
their own products. So, um, one of the, I think we were talking about this before. We'll get to that in a minute. But I guess what was kind of your transition like as you're putting in the effort, you're starting to get the skill. How was it when you started to take on your first few projects and how did you feel about applying what you learned?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess we'll go back before I started with Paris because again, like a lot of writers you see, and I've mentored a few myself now, had them and briefly as like training sessions or just copy critiques, this kind of thing. And so you see it, right, with people that are just starting off, myself included, right? You look back at what you've done and you're like, you just cringe at how bad it was, right? But if you don't do that after time's passed and something's wrong, right? Like you're not improving. And so, I had a few projects, some email series here, a quick sales page or landing page there. And so, got a couple like small successes under my belt. And this is before, like I said, joining Paris. And I knew that I needed to up my game because it just wasn't going to work, right? Like I couldn't just spend my whole time um, doing these small projects or writing blogs and all this and that. And so I think, you know, tell me if I'm answering your question now, because once I joined as a copy cub with Paris, um, it just sort of hit you, right? Like, wow, like total mindset shift that there's so much you're missing, right? And that's like I'll be the first one to tell you the importance of having a mentor. People ask like, what's the biggest takeaway you had from the training? And I think almost right away, I came up with my answer, and it hasn't changed. And that is that how many different ways there are to turn off the reader or the viewer, or you know. And so that's why I was saying before, like you just don't realize all your blind spots and think, wow, like saying that will piss people off, or saying this will alienate them, or forgetting to do that is going to make them, click off your page. And it was just like, yeah, a whole paradigm shift for me.
Of course, Paris is one of the exceptions who's been just very much a leading mentor and held in very, very high regard for many, many decades as a copywriter starting, I don't remember how, but and even up until today, with so many things going on in the copy world, which is really amazing. And you're probably one of the lucky few who has got to work with them that closely for such a long time. But so making your transition, I guess let's say early on, did you have a favorite project? Or maybe even if it's the most memorable project, or even if it's one of the most terrible projects you had starting off. Can you think of something that comes to mind? Maybe one of your first, either if it was like a job you took on or a copy project that was either the most intimidating or the most exciting when the first few years,
Hmm. That is a very good question. Most intimidating, or something that was the biggest challenge?
or something that was something you were the most proud of as you you started really, really putting your skills to the test and things started to
Gotcha.
click.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd say probably the first time I had like a beat the control scenario. Granted that the current sales letter they had wasn't doing very well, so it wouldn't have taken a monumental effort to beat that thing. But it was actually for an organic single origin coffee product. Um, there's a company and someone I've known for a long time now who hired me. It was essentially my first full sales letter. So I'm actually glad you asked this, because you're right. That's probably my best example is I've never written a full sales letter at this point, and he's hiring me to do it, paying me a good amount of money. You know, my expectation is you'll beat the control, is what he essentially said. So, I'm like, all right, now we're putting, pedal to the metal. Let's do this thing. And so, I took what I had learned. At this point, I'd only been working with Paris for I don't know, probably half a year, maybe 6 months, 7 months, if that. And just like, went all out there, did what I could, combined what I had been learning with what I had learned to that point. And it was many long nights, it was, it was long hours. Now it's much easier, right? When you get into the swing of things and you've done so many different promos and you kind of get a systematic way of doing things. And there I was just, fumbling around and took longer than I probably needed to. But long story short, it ended up working out. It did beat the control and did well. So um, that's probably my best example of the first kind of daunting project that ended up turning out okay. And I did learn a lot from it.
It is kind of it's kind of this is a quick side tangent, but for the past few years I've been really, really immersed into sports, watching, playing, talking, and I'm like probably in the best shape of my life as I got a lot older. But when I was a kid, I was terrified of softball. It was like I was so scared of the ball. I would do great in practice, then it was time to play. I would just strike out over and over. We're playing infield or outfield. I would get so scared that the ball was coming to
Yeah.
me. And that was maybe when I was elementary, middle school. But just in the past maybe 5 years or so, I decided to, or 10 years, I decided to conquer that fear, which one of the worst experiences of my life was anytime someone wanted to play softball, I would run.
Yeah.
But it was just a way to challenge myself. But the craziest part was that was probably, it made me a lot better in my career in client attraction, negotiation, but it made me a lot better at copy too, especially under pressure, because in a weird way, that was an extreme example. Like, why would
Right.
anyone want to learn to play a sport they hated at the time? But when it was like time to write, I really noticed that it was just when I actually started to play softball and play more hardcore and actually put myself out there against really competitive people and throw, run, and catch and hit the ball really well. It was just like it felt similar, right, to learning all these things that you practice it and learn. Then now it's time to put it all to the test because there's some
Right.
people who it's the same with copy. There's some people who can really work with a mentor and then write test projects and then write their first few. But sometimes when they face a really big or intimidating project, nerves could get in the way, or there
Yeah.
can be that. I think no matter how old you get in the industry, there's still that time where, like in softball, if you drop the ball a few times or if you screw up multiple plays, it's there's some point where you could feel discouraged, or
Hmm.
even if you were good at one point. That's kind of a little side tangent, but um, yeah. So I guess at that point, right, you're transitioning from more so into not necessarily entry level, but you started to get home runs under your belt and you're building confidence. And then how did you kind of feel from there? Were you more so focused on really just honing your chops, or were you more so, about moving up the ladder or building your own company? Like, what was your next train of thought as you kept moving
Hmm.
up in your career?
Yeah. Well, just on your last point, you were the kid that was out there, and please don't hit the ball to me. Please don't
Yeah.
hit the ball to
Even
me.
as I got more athletic in
Yeah.
college, and I was like, people would play softball, and I would just avoid it at all costs.
Yeah.
I could play other sports, I just know I had a trauma associated with softball.
Yeah. There's similarity there, that the fragile writer's ego, right?
Yep.
Like I wanted to have an opportunity like that to work with the big boys, but then once it
Yeah.
came time, you're like, oh my God, like I'm exposed.
Yeah.
I don't really know what to do. And so that was good.
That's
I
exactly what
should,
it
you know
is.
what I should say actually, I think this was probably a couple of years later, but that spec piece I submitted for the one of the health marketers at AWAI's boot camp, they liked it. They didn't end up testing it, and again, not gonna take no for an answer. Keep plowing down. I ended up using that exact idea, switching up a bit, using it for another client, and that since paid me royalties for several years. So just as
Nice.
like for the listeners out there, right? Like if you know you've got a good idea, especially if someone else has said that too, just keep going with it, right? Like I was literally shopping that thing around afterwards, like talking when I was trying to get new clients, right? In my first year, like, hey, this is an idea I had. Are you interested? Are you interested? Like I just was knocking on doors basically, right? I'm not afraid to say, like, you gotta put feet to pavement and or fingers to keyboard, right? And go after what you want. So um a lot of it, almost every dollar I can count to this day is like me chasing after people and prospecting and all that. I've had people approach me, but usually it was not the choice projects. It's usually you have to go after who you want, right? And so I've worked with some really good clients since and currently. But yeah, if I hadn't have gone after them, it wouldn't have happened, right? So I went through a lot of blood, sweat, and tears in the Copy Cub program that I was in. It was a grueling 6.5 years, and we had to show up every week. It was as Paris would say, it's like indentured servitude. So I'll forever be grateful for him and always keep in touch. Like I don't even want to think about where I'd be if I wasn't with the program in the program. But it really like put you through your paces, right? Like every week there was homework and you had to listen to the calls and come up with your takeaways for the calls. And so, you know, it was just as much being inundated with some of the greats. And actually, I meant to show this earlier, but for listeners out there, viewers out there, you see that?
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's
And
it's
then, of course, other side
yeah,
is David Ogilvy. David Ogilvy has my back, and the first one was Eugene Schwartz as my homeboy. I think I have to
that's
shout out
amazing.
Brian Kurtz for that because he's selling that
I'm
on
I'm
here
in
as
his Titans
marketingshow.com. But
I'm in his Titans Accelerator Mastermind. I gotta get my hands on one
Uh,
of those.
you should. Actually, I was in that too for a while. And Brian, if you're watching, great group. It's just one of those things, right, John? Like I was in several of those, and because I was busy with client work and living with my family and everything, I just didn't end up getting using the great value from it. So I ended up leaving. But anyway, this was supposed to be an open loop, though, to what we're going to get to later, or what I expect we'll get to later, that Eugene Schwartz and sophistication and all that. Um, and so anyway, we were sort of like went through our paces with all the greats, right? We did Eugene Schwartz, we did Claude Hopkins, we did Vic Schwab, we did all these, learn from the masters, right? Because they give you your foundation, and then as you go, you start learning from current contemporary ones, obviously like the pros at Golden Hippo, Craig Clemens,
All right.
some of the, like markers that Stefan's worked with, all that. So you get a nice, how do I want to say, like holistic view of everything from then till now. And then you see, a lot of the similarities, but also some of the way that things have changed. So, um, yeah, I think your question was about how I'd built my business, but
Oh yeah,
if you
well,
want to
it's just kind of
recalibrate there,
it's kind of like your expansion, or of course, as you grow, your perception will change of your copy, then how you see the world, and who you associate with, and what styles you like best. And
yeah.
sometimes people will run from it. I mean, I don't know why I keep bringing up softball. I was one of those kids. Now I'm like, I'll play tons of different sports, compete with people half my age. But as a kid, I still go back to that softball trauma where it was sometimes, I'm not going to lie, earlier on in my career, even if I would hit home runs and have 3, 4 good years in a row, and then I would just drop the ball on one huge project, and that softball trauma would kick in. I would just imagine trying to catch an outfield ball and getting a black eye from getting hit by the ball or something. But that's just an example of being very self-critical
Mhm.
and expecting perfectionism. But there is that, not that extreme, but that's kind of an example of how you progress in your career too, because either the nerves
Mhm.
kick in or you realize, shoot, I'm a lot better than I thought, or you go on to play not necessarily different positions, but you go off to find either different styles of copy, or do you want to work with agencies, or help build one up. But one thing I wanted to ask you about, which was something when we last talked, we were riffing on it for a little bit, but I think this is one of the biggest things. In my opinion, this is probably one of the most humbling things, which I love, is where not necessarily old school, but I guess old school veterans, A-listers, copywriters meet sort of the new breed, the new blood coming out, the hot shots 1 to 3 years
Mhm.
in, where there's sometimes they can just beat the crap out of controls from like 10-year, high level veterans, and they're just 1, 2, 3 years in because they are testing things that are almost against the grain, right? There's
Right.
like, a quick example is, short form copy hooks for even subject lines or short form Facebook ad hooks. For example, there's things that we're going by, the curiosity, the incongruent juxtaposition, teasing some sort of trick like, 7-second copywriting loophole could unveil
Mhm.
XYZ. These little things we use, and then there's new structures out of the gate that upon first glance, many highly trained veterans would be like, why am I going to try that? But from what some of us are seeing, especially across alternative health, is that some things that are against the grain are actually outperforming some of the more classic traditional stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, that was probably one of the biggest eye openers, and I think it's something everyone, whether even if you're writing for your own products or you're in house or you're a veteran or you're brand new, that's something I think everybody should be cognizant of, is that clash of sometimes something that sounds really against the grain can really outperform some stuff that's really doing really well. I mean, I think there was one you mentioned. It was about no, there was quite a few. I don't want to get too deep into details, but there was, we were playing with hooks that
Mm.
started off with, the same thing, weird kitchen hack XYZ, 5 minute weight loss routine, doesn't require food, these kinds of things. And
Mhm.
I think you had a couple examples of times where you actually tested, you were you taught to do that kind of thing and then it didn't work, or was it vice versa?
Right. Yeah, so I mean, I see what you're alluding to, and you mentioned earlier, obviously you and I worked at an agency not that long ago, and it was, to borrow the term again, it was like a paradigm shift because, as I'd said, like I've written a few controls for different health marketers, felt good about myself. I'd just finished up my mentorship program and had been in all, like you said, Brian's and David Deutsch's and all these different things, right? Like felt probably getting closer to the top, right? Not an A-lister by any means, but had had the success. And then we show up to this place, and it was like I didn't even know what copywriting was anymore. It was like completely, like you said, against the grain of what you'd been taught. I was trying to think of an analogy for this, and there's got to be something better out there. I mean, everyone should always think that because there's always going to be a better idea than what you come up with. Um, but like the analogy of it was, and because I'm Canadian, I'll use hockey. um, you put in all these years of training, you wake up early, you go through the camps, and you build up your skills, you do all this, you get drafted by the big team. You're going to soon make your debut, you get called up, you show up at the rink, and then hop on the ice, and there's the crowd is there to watch little leaguers play. That's probably the best way I
Yeah,
can describe it, because now you're sitting there with this background and then the training and all that. And so anything you would do would look completely foolish because here's, these little leaguers, 8, 10, 12 years old or whatever, playing around.
right.
And it's like, wow, like, okay, I guess what I was brought in for and what I was expecting is completely different. I'll get into the nitty gritty here, right? Because I've been taught to dig deep and come up with things that are on people's minds that people are thinking about, and write in a way that's really compelling, and you'd see some of these things that were working. We'd try our best, and it would be beat, like you said, like by the 1 or 2 year copywriter, um,
Right.
because, and I'll get to the again the Eugene Schwartz open loop in a second here. um, you'd find some of these things. Like what are some of the best examples? Like I remember there was one client where the script was something like, most people don't realize that clogged arteries are the number one cause of heart disease, heart transplant, and whatever the third thing was. And I'm like, seriously? Like this is a revelation? That's like big news. This is actually something that people are sticking around and listening to. Like I bet you that would be the number one reason people point to. Bet you if you went out to the street, asked 10 people, at least 7 or 8 would say, "Oh yeah, clogged arteries," or at least mention something like that, right? Something to do with artery health is causing heart disease. Like, it's a
Right.
known thing. It was just like another one with a joint pain supplement. The narrator is talking about how a loss of cartilage could make you give you aches and pains because the bones start rubbing against each other. I'm like, my goodness, like this information has been around for decades, right? Like it's just a
Yeah.
known thing. But yet these things were converting, and then we'd try these really what I thought were cool things, right?
Yeah.
I found a study where a dude had like a pure Oreo diet. He had 12 Oreos a day for a month, and it ended up making its way into a medical journal. Had 12 Oreos for a month. They checked his blood pressure numbers and all that. And by the end of it, it actually had outperformed and stayed lower than what doctor-approved statins would do. Like that's pretty cool, right? I
Right.
mean, that's the kind of thing that normally would work with clients that I've worked with and had success with. But no, the generic, most people don't know that clogged arteries the clogged arteries are the number one cause of heart disease. It's like, okay, like the game has changed here. This isn't
Right.
working. And so try as I might to think that I could beat any of these things, right? You mentioned some of them. I think I'd written some down, like the usual stuff. 5
Yeah.
second breakfast hack or the 7 second ritual, bedtime,
Yeah.
nighttime, whatever ritual. Just throw in some X second thing and then
Yep.
the benefit and you're golden, right? Like as my mentor would say, that's lazy copy. Like anybody can do that. Well, didn't seem to matter because it's still converted. It's still converted
Right.
better than what a lot of what I did. And so it made me wonder, like, does sophistication not exist anymore out
It
there
is.
in the zeitgeist?
It's very, I've been fascinated with alternative health for I mean, maybe like 4 or 5 years. I just put a lot of other niches aside just to obsess over this kind of thing and stuff we study from old print magalogs and old
Mhm,
direct mail pieces where we have to look at, I don't even men's health snippets and stuff. A lot of that kind of thing does still convert, the stuff that wasn't even, you have to take pictures of old postcards and scan it on black and white paper and
mhm,
then pass it on to new school. Those things still convert, but that is true though. There are some things that we can take from those that are just not performing well, or some new school concept comes out of the gate that
mhm.
sounds completely counterintuitive and it's outperforming, which is, I mean, we can't predict those things. It's better for everyone across the board to get on board about that stuff. But I mean, from a very competitive standpoint, it's
Yeah,
good to stay on our toes that way, to know there's other things that can still really go against the grain and convert really well.
right.
But I think that's also a humbling journey for us. It's also a relief, if something sounds extremely ridiculous and lazy and but actually converts really better.
Yeah.
In
Can you
in a
get
way,
away
it
with
might be
lazy,
easier. Maybe
basically?
it's, I know, in a way, it's like maybe it's a little bit, maybe it could be a little bit easier for us, a little
Right. Like
new
it
ways.
was a total it was totally maddening, I guess is a good word for it, because again, you're taught in such a way and to look out for these things and don't do the lazy copy. And you'd think that banner blindness comes in, right?
Right,
Because how many years now have we seen you see it like I said in these ads, you see it on ClickBank, you see it in all the stuff that shows up in your email, like the 7 second stuff and the rituals and the hacks and the tricks and all that. They've been done to death. Like it's just so out there. So I was purposely staying away from that because it happens so much. But, the data don't lie. People are still responding to this. So it's like everything I thought I had known about, the stages of sophistication, bringing in Eugene Schwartz here again, like, I don't know, is in today's day and age, and again, I can only really talk about health because that's what we were responsible for working on while I was there. But is sophistication somehow not apply in the same way as it did in yesteryear? Like, is it because people were more discerning back then, or they were exposed to the megalogs, like you said, or they had more things in print and there was less competing voices out there? Like, it was very, very, very challenging. And I wanted to say another thing about the our experience there. And anyone who knows me and some of our colleagues that we still chat with, will probably have a smile about this, but working at the ad agency, right? It was almost like the Wild West, like anything would go. And so another thing that we struggled with was what was, as I like to call, the made up shit. Like you've all seen that, let this soft mineral melt under your tongue and feel better in whatever it was, or use this ice hack to clear up sinuses in 7 seconds or 7 days, or use the, and then I'd ask them like, okay, so what is that thing, right? If I was going to riff off it or come up with some challenger ads of my own, what is it? Oh, well, it's just an ad. I'm like, what? And it's like, yeah, there is no payoff for that. And I'm thinking like that's like one of the cardinal rules is you pay off what you, it doesn't have to be right away. You can
Right.
have open loops, you can do all the tricks of the trade, but you got to pay it off somewhere, right?
Right.
But this was happening left, right, and center. And so I'm like, okay, if this made up shit is working, why wouldn't we always make shit up then? I don't advocate for that, and I personally don't do it. But I'm like, so then where's the bar? When do you make things up versus not making things up if they seem to work so well? And this was like my internal struggle for my most of my time there is like, I don't know, like it's almost like everything I've done and had success with and learned from the best, it's like those rules are out the door now, at least when it comes to ads. We're talking like say Facebook, YouTube.
Right.
So it was maddening to say the least.
Yeah, I took a stab at a couple of those and it just went way over my head. I mean, it was just like, it was just to simplify the answer at the time for me too, was just to simplify my thought process. But I'm doing like the incongruent, the juxtaposition thing,
Mhm.
like rub this ointment on your wrist for 30 seconds and then blah, blah, blah. The 30-second morning routine to lose weight without eating, changing your diet. Those kinds of, not necessarily that copy, but that line of thinking. But it was take a stab at these new ways of doing things. And then sometime it was just off the bat, like this ain't gonna work. This is
Yeah,
just breaking all the rules. And then when it did, it was just everyone sitting there. But it's not just with you and I. The thing is, this is happening across the board. I mean, not to
right.
go too deep, it's happening. People are doing YouTube ads or organic content and stuff. There's some of them are going against the grain, and it's performing really well. But that's just going down a different tangent. But yeah, it's interesting to see these evolutions in alternative
Mhm.
health too. I mean, those trends might be short-lived. They may or may not be pushing the envelope in terms of not in how outrageous or aggressive messaging should be. But overall, it's a good challenge, which is interesting because it's at that cusp of specifically you train with guys like Paris, who's even till this day is still held in very, very high regard as a mentor, and there's guys staying sharp in Copy Accelerator. And yeah, there's these things coming out the gate, that are to a lot of us are just like that's not going to work, and then it does.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I've sort of beaten the dead horse here, but it's true. It's like, wow, it goes against everything that you've learned from some of the best in the game. And it's like it's the cognitive dissonance. Do I have to unlearn some things that I've learned and just embrace this new wave or new frontier of copywriting that seems to resonate with people, even though by all accounts it probably shouldn't be, just because it's been done there, been done before, been done to death, right? So why would it work? But this is, as you and I talked about before, this is the plateau that you kind of find yourself on, right?
Right,
Success and progress is not linear, so um, this is something what we're going with now. And again, outside the scope, but another thing to throw in a wrench into that is compliance, right? You sort of
right.
hinted at that before about how aggressive you want to go. And um, needless to say, a lot of these clients, particularly that are working with the agencies, are much less risk averse than a lot of them that I've had success with. I tend to work with a lot of compliant marketers, which is always harder to make work because you can't just say whatever you want like some of these other ones do.
So transitioning to that, what are you up to now? Is it are you still focused on the same style of copy? I guess not necessarily the same style, but are you still more so in the same industries?
Mhm.
Are you looking for kind of partnerships? What's your radar on nowadays?
Yeah, so I'm still in health, natural health, almost exclusively because as I say, I really like the science and I like the sell. So, you marry the two, and I could see myself in health for, the rest of my life in some capacity. I'm working with a couple really great clients at the moment, and running the gamut, right? VSLs, emails, landing pages, advertorials, that kind of thing.
Right.
Um, but yeah, like I think in the next step, because I've continually, grown my freelance business and work with a bunch of different people, and it's great. Um, but I am more eyes to the future now and thinking about my own products. And you mentioned partnerships. Yeah, I think what I want to do, if not do my entirely own thing, is get with some of these marketers that I'm starting to compile here. Like what do they call it, the Netflix of health, like Zonia, if you've heard of them, or Natural Health 365, those
Yeah.
health publishers that sort of have the same that's the modern version of yesteryear's like Bottom Line and all these info publishers that I cut my teeth on learning how to do, and because of my mentors and all that, right? Like I'm really comfortable in that space. I love the information side of things. Then the compliance doesn't matter nearly as much, and just helping people, helping humanity at large. And so I think that's where I want to go, is be involved in more of those sorts of businesses that are actually producing really cool cutting edge information so that my skills are best used rather than coming up with new 7-second breakfast ritual that that expunges fat in 2 seconds. And so yeah, that's basically what I'm looking for now. I luckily can be choosy because of putting in the work in past years, right? So
Right.
I'm in no hurry, but I, yeah, would like to partner with eventually or come up with um, my own way of helping humanity, right? And for anyone out there,
Yeah.
I do enjoy copy critiquing too. I've had a few students, like I mentioned earlier, some stayed on for a few months. Others are just like, can I buy like 2 or 3 hours of your time, do a critique and a review of that and blah, blah, blah. So I'm always open to those. I'd really love to teach.
Cool. Yeah, there's I think the health industry, the demand is only going to grow for, copywriters, even, the CRO performance marketers, and copywriting is never going to die, especially not in alternative health. I think the industry is only evolving for
Mm.
the better, and that industry is also never going to die as a
Everyone's
whole.
getting older.
Yeah, we all need to be healthy and stay healthy, but I think the evolution is really cool about how, you know, new school is very much challenging themselves right out of the gate. First 1, 2, 3 years in, now the more veteran copywriters are now having to meet those challenges, which I think is actually it's more of a competitive environment in that sense, which is probably something that's necessary. But if someone wants to
Mm.
get in touch with you, is there a email for you, a website?
Yeah, you can just email me. It's my first name, Drew, Drew, at captaincopywriting.ca. There's that .ca for Canada. Wasn't able to get .com. So yeah, I mean, you'll put in the show notes, I think, right? It's
Yeah,
literally
yep.
captain and then copywriting. So
Yeah,
Drew
it'll
at
be at the bottom
captaincopywriting.ca. Yeah.
in the
And
description. You can go down and click you'll
yeah,
see it at the bottom.
and I think one of the fleeting few who I'm still on LinkedIn a lot. Again, that's helped bring me success because you can get right to decision makers right away. And I don't know, I just like hanging out on there and seeing what's new and sharing some thoughts. So also people, please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. That link will be below too. So
Thanks again for joining us. We enjoyed having you sit there right next to us in your virtual seat, and I hope the feeling was mutual. Don't forget to rate, share, and subscribe to the Authority Marketing Podcast. And if you'd like, check out some other episodes we've got. Stay tuned for our next one.